The craziest way anyone has ever won an F1 world title. Us F1 fans dream of a title fight going down to the wire, don't we? It just makes that final race taste that little bit sweeter when two or more drivers are in with a shot of the ultimate success in motorsport. Well, how about winning the world title out of your car and pushing it over the line? Yes, this actually happened in 1959 with Jack Brabham. Jack Brabham was a unique F1 driver. While most would just race the car, he would help to design them as well. In 1959, he was part of the Cooper team, and throughout the year he'd discuss designs with his friend Ron in Australia. They'd share ideas and complicated drawings by airmail, and then Brabham would give them to the team to build. At the final race of 1959 at Sebring in America, Brabham was fighting two other drivers for the title, Sterling Moss and Tony Brooks. All three of them had won 2 races that season and were separated by 8 points. Brabham 31, Moss 25.5 and Brooks 23. They didn't really have massive points totals back then, as you can probably tell. Really, it was Brabham's to lose. Just finishing in front of Moss and Brooks would seal the deal. Moss needed to win with the fastest lap, which they awarded a point for then too, or finish second with Brabham behind, and Brooks would need to absolutely dominate. Moss was on pole in his customer Cooper, having qualified 3 seconds ahead of Brabham's works car. Third was supposed to be Brooks, which would have made it a top 3 in the standings on the front row. Yeah, they had 3 car front rows back then. But Brooks was moved down to 4th after a time by American Harry Schell was found. Schell had gone full Mario Kart, excuse the pun, and found a shortcut which meant he went fast enough for the front row. The time was allowed because no one could prove he'd cut the track. They didn't have onboards back then. At the start, Moss and Brabham flew off into the distance with Moss leading. Brooks was rammed by his teammate and had to pit for 2-minute repairs. Moss started to build a lead. He was out in front by 10 seconds when disaster struck. His gearbox had broken. He'd been using the older, more unreliable spec that hadn't been modified by Brabham. With the more reliable gearboxes, the Works Cooper team were now 1 and 2 with Brabham leading his teammate Bruce McLaren. His engineering skill was paying off. Brabham and McLaren led all the way, but were being closed in on at the end by commentator's nightmare, wait for it, Maurice Trintignant in another customer Cooper. I literally had to Google how to say Maurice's name. Probably still butchered it. They had the gap under control, but then, at the final corner of the race, Brabham's car started to slow. He had run out of fuel. Brabham was stopped at the bottom of the uphill main straight, 400 metres from the line. He was so close to the finish, he started to push the car. That's right, after a physically strenuous 350km race, he was pushing his car to the line. The rule stated that he had to cross the line without any assistance, so he pushed it by himself. He had no idea where the other cars were and where they'd finished. He just wanted to do as much as possible. It took him 5 minutes to shove his car to the line. He made it and collapsed. He was severely dehydrated, but he'd managed to get a result. He'd finished 4th. Brooks had passed him for 3rd, but not enough for him to beat Brabham. I mean, how on earth can someone finish 4th after 5 minutes of pushing their car is beyond me. But hey, F1 in the 50s for you. He hadn't done it all that smoothly, but Jack Brabham was now an F1 world champion, the first Australian to win it, and he did it by pushing his car over the line. Well, sort of. A rule existed at the time that meant only the 5 best results across a season actually counted to their final points total. The rule was there to make up for reliability, which makes sense, but it meant Brabham's such hard-earned 4th place wasn't counted in the end. He could have left the car and still been champion. Someone probably should have told him before he did all that, shouldn't they? But the thing was, he wanted to win so much he wasn't considering that at the time. He just wanted to finish the race as high up the order as he could. To be willing to do that, you've got to say he was a champion in the making. Jack went on to win the title again in 1960 and then a 3rd time in 1966 when he did it in his own Brabham team. He's the only driver to win the championship in a car he built. There you have it, how Jack Brabham pushed his car over the line to win the championship but could have just left his car where it broke down and got a nice cool lemonade. Will we ever see a crazier close to a championship? Let us know in the comment section below.